Something I kind of forgot. All the offices after the election, except for the Chief Justice and not him, the General, are partisan offices. They all resign upon the election. And the President can assign these out, and it's possible that someone has some card or some advantage that they could give to the player, some kind of support, I don't know what, particularly in the nominating situation when people are actually not in this particular presidential race, but in some of the especially one-party system type races. I could see some support that someone gives in exchange for receiving one of these offices, if that makes some sense. Without knowing what the cards are, it's hard to tell what offices are valuable. Certainly after a couple of plays, one begins to realize, and one can assume Secretary of Treasury is very valuable because the taxes and the tariffs are going to run through that, or at least important. It might not be so valuable if taxes are being passed, but tariffs are generally positive and are kind of nice. They're kind of freebies for the game. Okay, so that's where we started there. Now we're in the phase with the issues where we have to look at the presidential handling of offices, possible tariff, taxes, etc. that we had before. In with that, we're going to be drawing these. Now, no promises were made. Gallatin certainly wouldn't have made them. So he's not going to assign any offices at this point unless somebody offers him something or they need to be assigned. He would like to assign offices to his own people, Burr and Henry, but as the situation warrants. So let's start drawing. And hopefully I have all my electoral votes correct. Let me just make sure on that. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 for purple. 5, 9, 11 for green. 9 for orange. 6 for red. And then lots here. 5, 7, 15. Like in Republic of Rome, actually, a lot of the cards that give you additional votes, etc., I find when I play at solitaire, I almost never play them because the deals are made, right? And honestly, when I play opposed, it's not too different from that. Every now and then somebody pulls something out of their ass, but usually the deals are made and the players just figure, I can't do a damn thing about it. All right, so let's flip over our first event. Our economy is okay, so it might be difficult for Treasury to get something passed. They may have to get some deals cut to pass a tax or a tariff or something, and that might help me pass one of these, like before. So this is Northwest Indian War. It has no effect. The general has to resolve it. I could ask the general to stop because Clinton is not necessarily the best person for that position. This is not under Marshall. This is his. On the other hand, I think it's kind of cool if the general fails here. Of course, that puts the card in the next deck. But that's too bad. So I'm gonna let George Clinton handle this, and he's gonna lose 2 popularity for a failure, unless he has something that helps him, which he probably doesn't. Plus a support towards conservative, Liberal Party leader gets influence removed from play, or player indicates one of his liberal statesmen who has at least. Okay, you know what? Before that happens, I'm going to play the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions so that my 2 popularity doesn't go to waste and I get an influence point. And then after the war, I'm going to lose my popularity. And that is one unresolved issue, which is going to go to the next deck. And I'll put that underneath. This put the cards underneath isn't so terribly bad when you have two hands, but it's kind of hard with the camera. Okay, I should keep a count of how many we're getting here. So now we go to the second one, and note I didn't have to go to Congress for that. That was just the general handing it. The Bill of Rights, big popularity gain. The President and Congress deal with this. So to resolve this, nothing happens. I just get a huge popularity boost for Gallatin. If it's failed or ignored, the public support goes way down for the liberals. But you know, even people like Jefferson may not be terribly in favor of this. This is kind of the problem. How are you going to convince someone to vote this into place? Well, for votes, we quickly do a calculation of what we need, and luckily I have a calculator, not that I really necessarily need it, but 15, 27, 38, 47, 53, 54. Which means I'm going to need a total of, and let's just do that, but I'm going to need more than 27 votes to pass this. That's assuming nobody plays additional cards for votes, though, and that's one of the problems with, you know, doing this by calculation in this way. You really kind of want to keep the votes on both sides. But I need a total of 28 votes. As orange, the presidential player has 9. If I can form a coalition with yellow and purple, the problem is I don't know what the next issues are. Usually in Republic of Rome, the coalition is formed out of, you know, the spoils that are available and the wars you're going to prosecute and everything like that. It's all made into this big package deal. Not necessarily voted on. It can't be voted on as one big package usually. But the players come to an agreement. Here, I don't know what all the rules are that I'm going to be facing. So people have to kind of say, well, all right, I want an office and I want your support with Congress in passing this. So that's kind of the question. So Bill of Rights, yellow has not gotten much in the way of popularity. So I believe what he's going to ask is, hey, why don't you make one of my people, preferably someone decent, either Adams or Madison, Secretary of the Treasury, and I get to pass a tariff. Okay, that sounds positive. Who else do I need? I need either purple or green. These guys over here. Well, to get the strongest possible support, what you want to kind of do is provide positions to everyone. And what I'm going to do here for this support, I think, see, the problem with this is I would like to take another position for myself. So I think Jefferson probably wants Secretary of State. Andy Jackson will be my special envoy, God help us. And Aaron Burr, Secretary of War. Let's see if everybody's willing to work with that. Oh, yeah, and Treasury's going to go over there. We could give it to Adams. The problem with giving Jefferson a job is that that's going to boost his popularity, and he has a chance of beating Gallatin in the popularity race. He already is bigger. So I kind of would not like to do that. So if instead, let's assign Andy Jackson the Treasury and state an envoy, let's Let's make John Quincy Adams the Secretary of State and Madison the Special Envoy. And this is sort of just a, hey, can we work with this as an offer so that we can pass the Bill of Rights for my purposes? Now, the Bill of Rights is important, so I don't know how much these people are happy with it. And I would say that they've stood up as a group and said, no, you got to give more away. You're not going to take the Secretary of War. So that kind of opens things up. Treasury is the most valuable of them all. Okay, how about if I give Secretary of War I'm not sure. I can't give it to Alexander Hamilton. Well, how about we give that over here to someone who doesn't have anything? What if we give that to Daniel Tompkins here? Are you guys willing to accept that? He's leaning that way, which means we need another big vote, which could be Secretary of the Treasury, I hate doing this, over to Rufus King. He's got a possible objection to this. I could see King accepting this pretty easily. He's willing to go with that. Let's see about King, yeah. Okay, so this is the coalition that's going to form. We didn't really ask anything from Blue, but he'll probably vote with us at this point, being pretty happy about the whole thing. So, now... Oh, son of a bitch. Trying to do things one-handed is really hard. And yeah, I know. The answer is use a tripod. Except then you force me to wear clothing. And yes, that's basically one of the prime reasons no tripod. The other is I do need to be able to zoom in on things, and I don't want to deal with a fucking tripod to do that. I need this. Okay, so the Secretary of War gets a point of popularity. Rufus King gets a popularity, and we are going to pass a tariff. That's part of the agreement. It's not going to be handed out immediately. Nothing went over here. Over here, 2 more popularity. 1 to Adams, 1 to Madison. And I can give no, I can't give this to Adams. I'm going to do it this way. I'll give it to Monroe. Basically, and Madison. And they have no real objection to Madison getting it, I'm sure. Okay. And that means now we're going to try to pass the Bill of Rights. And we're going to see if anybody's a dick. But my vote count right now is probably 15, 27, 36, 37 out of that 28 that I need. So I would say people are unlikely to be playing cards to grab votes for this one. They think maybe they can defeat something else. Well, it might be worth spending some cards. That's a lot of influence that Gallatin's going to get. A lot of popularity. Yeah, the alliance holds together. Here's the question. We were at 28, and I think, I don't remember, I can't count. 15, or I can't remember, 27, 27, 36, 37. So the opposition is 11. Yeah, I can't imagine Jefferson voting against the Bill of Rights, but 11, he could have complained it's not good enough. And So we're looking at about 17 against. So it's 28 to 17, or sorry, 37 to 17. That means I need about 20 votes to overcome this. And I look at my hand, and I'm unable to stop it. Which means the Bill of Rights is going to pass. But will it pass if I do something else? In particular, if I played this card to remove a partisan officer, removes the partisan office of a member of the same party, the president must immediately appoint a replacement for this office. The problem is, let's say I remove the Secretary of State, then Crawford can become that, or something like that. I could take Secretary of War out of play, but then that could be handed, presumably, over here, or to Elbridge Gerry, which wouldn't be much harm at all. Nobody would object to that. Remember, the Bill of Rights hasn't been passed yet, so that would probably not do me much good, so I'll hold off on this. So the Bill of Rights is now passed, and that's going to give 3 popularity, which gives me a big 5, and that helps protect Gallatin's position. This is important. Gallatin has 6 popularity, the same as Jefferson. Gallatin's in danger of losing his party's nomination if something good doesn't happen. That's really the issue here. And it's been resolved. We can just put this over here. And that's 2 resolved issues. I'm going to kind of set 2 more aside as the way to do that because I need a break. Okay, so let's draw another card. We've assigned everything, all our bribes. I don't know how much of a coalition there is, but at the very least, we're largely, that coalition is willing to support each other on passing certain things. Assume state debts. This is Treasury and Congress. It's going to cost us 25 out of our reserves. Luckily, we have a decent amount of reserves. That'll put us negative, but that's okay. Give 3 influence to the conservative leader and 2 to the liberal. And if we fail, the president loses some support in terms of liberality. Overall, this is not a bad card. Actually, the president should have put forward the tariff first. And after drawing this, I believe the Secretary of the Treasury, King here, is going to ask that, see, he has a problem. He's not good enough to resolve this. He doesn't have, between that and his and his influence, he doesn't have enough power to handle this. I think he wants that tariff. He's set up to handle that. Now, what I'm not sure about this is if there's a successful duel, do you get your popularity banked? That's not indicated on there. They're just removed from play. They're not dead. That's an interesting question. It's a pretty impressive card if you can, destroy, say, Hamilton's big popularity bank by shooting him with Burr, but Burr, of course, wouldn't be your top choice. You'd probably aim for somebody who's a little weaker. So, like, Pinckney could go out and kill someone, and, if the duel succeeds, both people fall away. If they don't provide victory points, that's going to be an issue. You could hunt somebody important. Anyway, let's get back to this assumed state debts. King is essentially demanding that the tariff be brought up first. Now, Burr wants this handled, and maybe King can say, well, maybe I can handle it for you. Gallatin wants this handled. But I think the real problem here is, hey, there was a deal, man. You don't want to break that deal. So, okay, we'll bring the tariff up for you. And tariffs are awesome. It's only a 3 popularity, or it only requires a 3 ability. King's only a 1, but he's going to throw 2 influence in. To get that, I should have littler. See, this big tray takes up so much space that I can't really fit it on the table too well, but I could. Okay. So this has passed the Treasury. Now the question is, will Congress vote on it? And everybody pretty much agreed to do so. I think it would require... Madison's kind of fading with, hey, I want this debt thing handled. What's going on with that? Let's hear a discussion of how we're going to handle that, the state debts, because if we're not going to take care of that, why are we even passing this tariff, damn it? That's an interesting question. He just has votes. Nobody seems to have a source of influence who really cares about this. I think maybe Jefferson cares about the debts. He has the ability to grab some influence, but not in the right place. And I don't believe that you can you give influence? That might be the way this handles. Somewhere or another, there are rules on what you can trade. You can give influence for votes. I've got to find the rules for bribes and such not. I'm looking for them, and I'm just not finding them. I know I've read them. I'm going to have to back away for a bit. So, influence points can be given to this guy to pass the tariff. Not between characters, but the player pools can exchange. So, he's willing to assume state debt if he's handed 3 influence. And the question, of course, there is, are people willing to hand it? And honestly, I don't think anybody cares enough about the state debts. They would rather see King take the popularity hit. So, King passes the tariff, and that creates a revenue bonus of $20. That's the second tariff. Tariffs are hard to get rid of. And now, the assumed state debts, King is not capable of succeeding at this, which means it's going to fail. The presidential party loses support, and he loses the popularity that he should have gained from the tariff, which he did not, because I didn't put the card up there, the chit up there. And I'm going to, although it's probably too late for this turn, move this over here. I've got plenty of room up in that corner for now. Okay, and that means we're on the last card here. and it is pay off the war bonds. This does not give a popularity bonus, but it gives a penalty if it fails. Again, a job for Treasury. The difficulty is high. We lose 52 off the reserves if it's passed, and 2 influence go to the Conservatives. If it's failed or ignored, there's a tension, which would give him one of those black cubes saying you can't win if the Civil War starts, if we were playing with that option. That's just to show you how ugly this is. And public support -2 to the president's party. The president is just failing here. Nobody's going to support King on this. He's feeling like an idiot for sitting on the Treasury. But, you know, he just is not competent enough. And that means he's going to lose 2 popularity. That's 1. And then there's another one. So now he's down to a 1 popularity. I don't think you can go below 0 with those. And this is a failed task. I suspect that the game feels like if people are kind of gamishly selfish, as they probably will be in a game, we're not going to see anything like, you know, the egalitarian impulses of Congress here, just because these things don't really hurt anyone, right? King certainly doesn't care, say, about the presidential party losing. Hey, I forgot. Public support -2. So now we're moving down towards the Conservatives. He certainly, you know, this faction cares more, is happy with that. They're not happy about taking the popularity losses, though, because those are victory points. But everybody else is kind of like, what's in it for me, man? And there isn't a lot to trade here. You got your cards that you could trade. He could trade away, you know what, the duel, coalition building, a few congressional votes. For an influence? Influence seems pretty valuable. Influence is the way you prevent yourself from getting in this situation. Now, of course, that particular card, yeah, he wouldn't have been able to pay that off anyway, no matter what. So, the war bonds and the assumed state debts, you know, unless other people were willing to give him a hand with that, and I see no reason for them to do so. This was a particularly ugly turn for the Treasury, though. It looked like Treasury was the bonus card because you get your popularity for passing the Bill of Rights. I'm sorry, not for the Bill of Rights, for the tariff. You know, you always get a popularity for the tariff. He would kind of like to repeal a tax, but the president's not going to allow him that. You know, taxes are hard to repeal, right? So, I guess that is all we've done. We've handed out all the positions. We deal with the Treasury, which isn't too exciting. The revenue this time is 46. We're in positive here, so we're doing quite well because we're not paying any of our obligations off. And it is election time. Let me come back after I figure out, we're under the same rules, but after I figure out who the nominees are. Poor Gallatin. He's not as popular as good old Jefferson. Well, actually, he's equally popular. But Jefferson is older. Jefferson wins the nomination. That means Gallatin's done. There doesn't seem to be a rule that prevents Gallatin from being selected as the vice presidential nominee. But Jefferson's not going to do that this time, right? Gallatin's a great choice. It means the liberals will win, probably. The opposition is going to be Hamilton again. Who has to pick first? It looks to me like Jefferson has to pick first. He's going to pick Daniel Tompkins, who gives him New York, another inroad into the Northeast. Whereas, who might end up president the same way Gallatin did. Whereas Hamilton is interested in getting someone Southern. Pinckney may be his best choice. Other choice is John Marshall, but and John Quincy Adams is a horrible choice because he's just a northerner without a lot of popularity. How did he get nominated? Yeah, I think Pinckney is my best choice far and away. So we're going to be going over to take care of our elections, and we'll come back over here and get these out of here. We should clean them up after the election, but I kind of like to look at them for a while. And why am I doing this in front of you? That's a good question. Okay, let's get one of each in play and see what our order is. Our order is presidential candidate of the party which had the most public support. Most public support is the Conservatives. That's going to be Hamilton in New York, and then his vice president, and then the president and vice president for the Liberal side. Now, do the Conservatives want to go first? We're talking New York and South Carolina for them. That they're going to be jumping out of. I believe I do want to get that first jump, so maybe I'll learn more about this system as I go through it and maybe not deal with it in quite the way I have been. Okay, and that means we've got, what, Virginia and New York for Tompkins. The reason I picked Tompkins is because he gets me up here in the Northeast. Okay, now things get kind of interesting because obviously the South's going to get blocked off by Pinckney right away. So now the question is, okay, where does Hamilton want to campaign? There's a lot of votes here, but nobody's going to get that. So he's going to run down into Pennsylvania. That's sort of Pennsylvania, Maryland. This is the bottleneck. Maryland really is. And that means Orange is next. We run up real quick. It's really more about which territories you pick than anything else. Virginia is a bottleneck, so I go into Maryland. And then, do I want to go into Pennsylvania? You see, by doing so, I lock everything down here off, but I think the answer is yes, because I'm already in Maryland with Jefferson. And that slides me around for another one. Red. Do I want to block this off? Well, that means Gallatin can't, Pinckney can't come up. So, I think the answer to that is no, I don't want to be in Maryland at this point. I want to claim New Jersey and send Pinckney up to get his votes into play. And then blue. Well, purple's not making its way down, so blue will go into Delaware. Purple could go into New Jersey. That would keep orange from sleazing its way up. That seems, it could go either way. It looks like it's going to be a pretty split vote across the board, actually. I don't think I have a way around this. Red will go into Delaware. Orange could get into Delaware. I'll go into New England, Delaware. It doesn't really make a difference there. Blue can't go further north, so down into the Carolinas. Orange couldn't play a second piece here. You can't block someone that way. You need both your candidates to do it. Purple over here. And now we're back through. Red doesn't have any more plays. Orange comes down here. And then blue here. And we've filled the card. And now we got to do some quick calculations. And what are those calculations? Well, remember, we're each running individually because it's before the 12th Amendment, which means one side or the other ends up winning the election, and I should have been more careful. One player or one character wins the election, which I should have been more careful about, because I was trying to play for make sure that our side wins, and that's not really the issue at play. So let's take a quick look at the different people, and I'm going to use pencil and paper because I don't have enough calculators for 4 sides. Okay, so let's take a look at red first. 12, 50, 57, 62. So Hamilton is at 62. Who's our running mate for him? Pinckney. Pinckney is orange. We're still in section A of the issues. So 26, 49, 59, 62 for Pinckney. Uh-oh. I think everybody's going to end up tied if I'm not careful, right? Yeah, everybody has the same values, don't they? 22, 34. This should be 72, shouldn't it? Let me recount. 15, 22, 34, 60, 72 for Hamilton. Okay. And we also have 72 for purple, which is the northerner, Tompkins. So we have a tie. And you can see, Jefferson has this real weakness because he's not able to get enough votes. 45, 49, 59, 62. There's more votes up here in the north, aren't there? 22, 34, 72, yeah. So the Northeast is able to dominate the elections here, and that's kind of interesting. So we had a tie. That makes things harder. Now we're going to go state by state, as chosen by the president. Well, Gallatin's the current president, and he really doesn't give a shit. It also probably doesn't much matter. So this time I can use calculators. I do only have 2 characters in play. I have Hamilton will make purple, and Tompkins will make green. Okay, well, let's work our way down. Anybody from Georgia? There's one, Crawford. Well, which way you want to vote, Mr. Crawford? Shit, I don't know. I really don't know. But it's to my better interests to vote for Tompkins out of the 2, because any deals that he makes are more likely to be me getting positions, because I'm all liberal. So I'll go pro-liberal there after discussing that with him. I think Hamilton's going to have a tough time because he's the center of conservative power and no one else is. So Georgia's worth 1. Next one. Again, the president doesn't really care, so he's selecting them in any order he likes. He's just going south to north. Well, maybe not. He doesn't want to run Virginia, Pennsylvania, and New York, because he may get something out of that. But the Carolinas. Anyone from the Carolinas. Now, this is interesting, because one by one the states are chosen. What counts as a state? These cards are kind of states, but I think this counts as 2 separate states, just like New England's going to count as 2 separate states. That disturbs me. And Connecticut's not in the game. What the hell? Yeah, I don't know what that's supposed to mean. But on the actual cards, each of the Carolinas is its own, state. The people are actually referenced from that. So that's how I'm going to do it, but I don't know if that's what's meant. So we got Pinckney from South Carolina. We'll do South Carolina first. But I'll look for both the Carolinas. And that's one of them going towards the conservative column, of course. Pinckney will vote for Hamilton there. So now it's 1-1. There's no North Carolina representative, so we're not going to have a vote there. He doesn't want to do Virginia, but he will do Maryland and Delaware. Okay, so let's do Maryland. I don't think we have a Maryland, but I don't know. Massachusetts. And I didn't see a Delaware in there either, so I'm saying those have both failed to present any votes. New Jersey will be next. I don't think there's a New Jersey candidate or statesman out there. The president always gets to go last because the regular order of voting applies here. So there's no extra votes for New Jersey. I guess we'll do New Hampshire and then Massachusetts. New Hampshire and then Massachusetts. No New Hampshire. We have a Massachusetts. Oh, geez. I'm having trouble seeing the guys who are in brown when they're mixed in. Okay, we have a couple of Massachusetts guys here. Do we have any more kicking around? I don't think so. Okay. So, Jerry has to make his vote first. And then John Quincy Adams. The problem here is these guys, Jerry can support Hamilton, but he's afraid if he does, that puts the Gallatin-Burr coalition, whatever, into a very powerful position. So he might be tempted to try to cut a deal with Tompkins as well. And he does that as well. So we're going to have the Massachusetts vote added to Tompkins. And now the choices are New York, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. Pennsylvania we control. That's a biggie for us. Virginia and New York are big cesspools in terms of number of people. So we're going to have a vote in New York first. And we have a lot of New Yorkers. Clinton's New York. He's already thrown his support towards Tompkins, so he'll continue to do so. So that's one in favor of Tompkins over there. Tompkins himself will vote for himself, but that's canceled out by Jay and Hamilton. And now Rufus King, that's -1 in New York. And DeWitt Clinton is kind of the tiebreaker in New York. Again, sitting in a position of some potential power. He could take up to 2 offices, but he's not going to have massive effects on all of this. So can he too work with Tompkins? And he can. So there's no vote for New York that's processed. That means we're going to Virginia next. Again, a mess. Virginia, 1 for Tompkins, 2, 3 for Tompkins, 4 for Tompkins. I don't have enough ability to change that, so that's going to be another vote for Tompkins. And now it's 3-1. I'm going to throw Pennsylvania to Tompkins as well. So it's actually an overwhelming vote in Congress. It's just a matter of it was a very close election. So we have another barely known president. This vaguely recognized Gallatin, name-wise. House Ways and Means. Almost ran for vice president. Yeah. He was foreign, so probably shouldn't have been able to. Okay, so that's 6 popularity that I get to score for the orange player, because he is gone as a retired president. And a very young one. And a very Swiss one. That shouldn't be legal. Guess they changed the Constitution for him. And we have a new president here who's going to get 3 popularity. And a little election marker. And we'll give them those. And at this point, all of the partisan offices are dismissed. Oh, Hamilton's vice president again. He gets another cube for that of popularity. We cannot be certain. Let's check who our most popular candidates are. 5 to 6. Jefferson's still the party leader here. Hamilton's still the party leader as vice president. Treasury goes away. General stays. Secretary of State and the envoy all are dismissed, or resign, actually. And that is our election. And now we'll go to the people phase, and I definitely could use a break before we do that. My worry here is, given the nature of the electoral politics and how they work out, I understand to some extent there was a certain dominance of Massachusetts in the Adams era, of the Northeast, of the ability to close that off. But here's my problem, or my biggest problem, is I don't think Washington can win a second term under normal conditions. Washington was universally popular. I'd have to look up the actual results, but one gets the feeling, and maybe I'm mistaken on this, but that he won everything. You know, that he may have lost some electoral votes, but he won in the Northeast as well as in the areas that are sort of dominated by Virginia. The South certainly is all Virginia, but the question is, how much further can you go from there? Well, that would be difficult if he has Adams as his running mate. Now, you could come to a deal with your running mate to prevent him from taking the presidency. So I could have seen some sort of deal with this unknown Tompkins. You know, what we're seeing is more the Burr type situation. No, I'm standing in for president. You know, I'm not going to resign. You know, I'm not going to avoid having as many votes. I want this straight up. I'll take the presidency if you give it to me, even if I was running for vice president. I think it was Burr. My memories are so weak nowadays. But had that happened, Tompkins wouldn't have won, and Jefferson wouldn't have won. It wouldn't have helped Jefferson. It would have been a help to Hamilton instead. And I think the same kind of circumstance happens with Washington. If he has John Adams as his vice president, and they run together, and Adams weakens himself so Washington can beat him, well, then the other side wins, perhaps. If they can manage someone like Gallatin, who shouldn't even be eligible, or Burr, or something like that, who has one of those northeastern lock-hold states. Pennsylvania is the best in the world. Gallatin, if he comes up in this era, he seems almost guaranteed to be able to grab the presidency if he gets a nomination. Dangerous fella. You don't want to nominate him. Well, there should be a law against it, right? It's in the Constitution. Anyway, yeah, that's very, very disturbing to me to have Washington unable to win a second term. And that's just a feeling. Maybe I'm not handling this correctly. I think I've got it right rules-wise, but maybe there's some sort of strategy or some sort of deal-making that I'm not considering here. But I'm beginning to think that this game, the system doesn't quite work. And it's primarily the electoral system in this case. But then there is that other issue that really worries me, which is the factor of I don't know what my faction is. And it's a shame. I had very high hopes for this. Well, I'll keep going with it, and we'll see, what else. I am having some enjoyment of it, and I could see playing this. My old buddy Dave would be the perfect person to be playing this in a group with, because he would just get such a kick out of Andrew Gallatin being president, and and I am too. However, I'm also looking at it as a simulation, as a this, as a that, and although it's funny and that makes it enjoyable, it doesn't make it a believable game, and that disturbs me. I think one of the problems is that the game is concerned with the rules of presidential election at that time, which didn't really conceive of a ticket, and the actuality which did. You had a president and a vice president running together. It was possible for an Aaron Burr to happen, who could challenge the presidential, that he wanted the presidential position. I think it's Burr. I don't. Again, the system represents the electoral politics to a good degree, I think. But what it does not represent is that your vice presidential candidate is delivering votes for the presidential candidate as well. And just like after the 12th Amendment takes place, the reality of the election, of what was being, of what U.S. elections were like, largely was being reflected in the 12th Amendment, rather than the 12th Amendment trying to fix a core problem. The core issue was the way the Constitution's written is you have a number of people who are all running, and the first and second place take presidency and vice presidency. The reality was, and that's somewhat reflected in the game, that you have people who run as a party, as a ticket, and there was a convention to give one less vote to the guy who, was not running for the president. But the reality was that the voting still tended to be along a ticket line. Now, as far as I can see, they also get wrong, or the designer also gets wrong, after the 12th Amendment, because you definitely were voting with a single slip of paper with both people's names on it at that point. It was not a, somewhere or another, I'm trying to remember how this works. No, that works as a team there. Maybe it's the single party election, which God knows, I don't know if that ever actually happened. When the Whigs fell apart, another party did arise, actually, more than one other party, and I don't feel like it really was a single party election. I don't think the U.S. ever really had that situation, so that's kind of a what if, at least in my viewpoint. So I really don't know, but it feels like the elections are very wrong, and they're a vital part of the design. Maybe trying to reflect the reality better is possible, and maybe it doesn't make as interesting a game. I don't know. Because you're also not seeing the deal making. The most popular person doesn't necessarily win the nomination in any given situation. So the nominating process is kind of bullshit as well. You almost feel like a ruling coalition is formed, and popularity should inform into that. And that would be a very, very complicated system to have, where players are making backroom deals. Some people may not even run. So, most popular shouldn't, necessarily have to stand for president or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, lots of interesting points of criticism here that I'm having trouble unwinding them all at once. We'll see. I'm up at the card drafting time, and at this point, and I kind of like that facet of the game. That's kind of cool as a catch-up mechanism. First player picked another character. That's a powerful advantage. The danger of that, of course, is there's somebody with only one character, and if he dies at this point, or stops being president, the guy with the most statesmen has to give one up. So it might be desirable not to play another statesman at this stage in the game, to hold him in your hand, which kind of defeats things, because you might have somebody who's getting very old hiding in your hand who probably can't do very well. The advantage for this card, though, is he's got 3 popularity, which makes him 3 victory points. That's better than most cards you're going to get, right? The next best card was Dolly Todd. Yes. You can see the Todd family's importance in both Madison and then all the way up to Lincoln, right? Which gives a popularity. That's a victory point. That's pretty good. What I've been avoiding is these divided votes, because we're almost at the end. No, I was going to say we're almost at the end of Era A, but we're not. Those are actually valuable cards for someone who wants to be president. Those are the ways you can break the electoral geographic lock. However, presidency is worth 3 victory points. So something like Pennsylvania might be worth it. I think green may well want that. Now here's the problem. If states start getting admitted, Jefferson becomes much more powerful. Virginia becomes more important. So he'll go with the same pick, but these are of some value because they don't get discarded until the issue deck runs out. It's not the action deck. I was thinking action deck. So they become kind of interesting. We have these negotiate a sabotage negotiation, where you can cancel the popularity gain and public support changes coming from an envoy issue. That seems pretty minor. You don't know whether or not you're going to have the envoy, in which case you want to hold these to protect yourself, or if you want to hit somebody. But either way, they might be an interesting card. The speech is probably the weakest card. It just gives you an influence. That's nice, but it doesn't really, I don't think, compare to these other cards that came up this time. I'll choose the rest of the cards as I go. After drafting, some people had some extra cards. Our president had to discard a card. Kind of a shame, too. It was the split the vote card. He tried to peddle it. Nobody had anything worth offering to him, so he threw it away. It might have been worth an influence or something. We got somebody else who has too many cards. Strikes me that I want to marry Todd off to someone. Do I particularly want... See, it seems to me it's best to marry people to older people, because they're going to die sooner and you're going to get their victory points sooner. Popularity, is very important, to how you win the game in this, as opposed to, say, Republic of Rome, where popularity is kind of something you want to have on younger people because they'll be able to get you to your victory conditions because of their popularity. Here, it's something you want on older people because they'll die with more glory, and marrying her helps. What else do we have? The Panic of 1797. The reserves go down by 2. Public support goes 1 towards the center. The president's popularity drops. And then this is out of play. And I'll find a place to put the discards for that. And then over here, Abigail Smith, who's going to give +1 ability to James Madison. I can't marry her to John Quincy Adams. I kind of like the idea of having a couple of people who are very, very capable. And then make an important speech. He has at least 3 popularity, so he's going to get an influence marker on his card. And that'll go away into the discards. All right. So that gave us that side of things. Now we're on control newspaper. Only the party leaders can do anything here. This is a Liberal Party marker. Do I want to spend 2 IPs to try to push public support in favor of the Liberal agenda? Well, what would be positive about that is if I could get the Liberal agenda up into the 12 era while I've got Jefferson around, or Jackson even, perhaps, although he's not got very much popularity of his own. So he's not, unless something happens to improve his popularity, like winning New Orleans or something, he's not really someone who's sitting there ready to take control. And I suspect most of the younger people are not very popular in and of themselves. Pinckney is, though. He's not all that young. So, the idea being that they come into prominence in the game, as opposed to someone like Jefferson or Hamilton, who was prominent during the Revolutionary era and has a lot of, goodwill towards him at that point, by the time of the game. So, what am I trying to figure out? I'm trying to figure out if this guy thinks it's worth spending to improve his newspaper situation. Because it does really push the popular support forward. I don't necessarily feel that it helps me more than it helps other people, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to shove this up to here, and that'll give us 1 popular support, and the cube goes away. And that kind of, makes it less worthwhile for the guy who bought that. Minor newspaper support. And that's the only newspaper thing, and now we're going to come to the per player rounds, and these order is from the president first, so I can give these discs back and handle that. I doubt a lot's going to happen there. I'll come back and report on what does, because I have to do some thinking. You know what, I'm going to actually reverse that decision by Jefferson. He's not going to pay 2, but maybe one of these others will, and he's in favor of that in general. Because if he can get the popularity up, that's great. So he doesn't see any real reason to just move it 1 forward. Kind of a weird split here in terms of what to do. So Hamilton, Jefferson, and Burr all made speeches. Hamilton and Burr got away just spending 1 influence for a popularity. Jefferson spent an influence and ended up spending 3 more to get a popularity. That's iffy. That much influence can probably buy you an issue success that might get you more popularity, but once you've spent 1, it feels like, that kind of kept some of the others, for example, Clinton from spending 1, or Madison even, because he's got a nice pool, he could afford to, simply because, well, they're not all locked on his main character. 1 influence lost due to a death or something is okay. Losing a bunch would suck. Which is why some people have done it. Hamilton spent some more of his to throw a newspaper into play, and actually he improved the public support of the conservatives. Probably depleting his own personal influence too much. His party has very little. It's mainly locked in him. But by doing that, as the preeminent player in terms of conservative ideology, he feels like in the long run that's going to help him. He really wants the conservatives to be doing well. It's a lot harder for the liberals to convince themselves to pump any value into long-term or short-term increases in the party position. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. Kind of reminds you... when the majority is on one side of the players, it actually allows the other side to gain a certain momentum in terms of trying to dominate the electorate for their ideology, which is kind of an interesting idea. I can see parallels to that in, say, the Goldwater conservative movement as compared to, a Republican Party that was fairly liberal compared to what it is now, for example. I think that's kind of how you can look at some of the issue that I have with the, hey, who am I as a player? You're sort of a coterie of people who can work together. So, Clinton and Jefferson are not in agreement, but by being under a player's control where there's sort of a mixture of conservative and liberal ideology, it means that you have a less polarized political process than you do today. But there is one strong axis of polarization sitting right here. And not so much here. I mean, places like this, but he doesn't have that many statesmen, so things could switch fairly easily. Here, 3-1, yeah, that's pretty big too, but not like 4 conservatives in one player's hands. To me, that kind of indicates a much, much more polarized electorate focus somewhere. Right? But it's not across the board. If you look, the majority actually sits with him on the conservative side, but there are still significant elements that are willing to work with more liberal politicians, right? It's kind of an interesting way of looking at it. I'm still not quite sure what a player is. It may be a certain kind of current that's represented by that. But then what does it mean to collect the victory points? Well, what does it mean in history of the world? Yes, I grump about those kind of games, and this has that same factor. But lots of people do like them. I love Europa Universalis and Empires in Arms, and those follow this kind of, well, not Empires in Arms so much, but maybe not Europa Universalis either. You're clearly a player. I'm talking more about the glory side of things. So yeah, this feels almost like friendships and little groupings that are perhaps across the aisle, but less to do with ideology. It's hard for me to put myself in that mindset, but I do kind of beginning to get a kind of grasp on how to accept that. In this case, in a way that it's much, much harder to accept, say, history of the world of, hey, why aren't the Romans like attacking North Africa? Why are they going to India? Because you own Carthage too? What? I forgot to handle the tension +1 off this. I handled all the other effects, I think, but the tension was supposed to go up by 1. And although there was the auctionable final action, nobody took it. In particular, the last player, the president, sitting on a bunch of cards that are useful, so he doesn't really want to draw a card. Only one person had a slot for a card. I don't know, some people may have something they could play. So, for example, he has Charles Pinckney, but he doesn't particularly want to play him because that might make it more likely he's going to lose someone when Tompkins loses his presidency, probably. And we had a number of people at full hands here, and I just don't want to play, to have to discard a card just because. I guess I can play the important speech. However, he's low on influence and really doesn't want to spend anymore. So everybody was kind of reticent towards picking that up. And that's the end of this video, and they're going long. This is a game that I feel like, first of all, it's not a direct port of Republic of Rome. There's no question of that. You can see the influences, but so it's not like I can just, hey, I'm playing Republic of Rome here. No, I've got to really examine it. And it's a very, very different kind of system from any other games, right? So I really do have to go into the exploration of it, almost as I do with very innovative Euros or, the first time I looked at a CDG or something like that. I really had to work my way through it to understand what the design intents are, etc. So, and to kind of understand what the play decisions are, not just, there's a lot of complexity in a game like this that there isn't in most Euros, right? So There's a lot of negotiation going on, a lot of that, and I want to be able to expose all of that, the different subsystems like the election subsystem, and we had another subsystem somewhere that I found particularly interesting, but I can't remember what it was. Well, maybe the little newspaper thing, but the different subsystems, the elections, all the negotiation that goes on, all that I feel requires a lot of exposition. And I'm less familiar with it, so I'm kind of struggling my way through understanding it all in order to explain it and to explain my own perceptions of it, which may not be fully formed at any given time. All right, let's send it up.